The light over southern Utah came in layers. First, the pale silver of dawn that washed the cliffs and set the sage to glimmering. Then, slowly, a soft rose bled across the stone towers, and the world turned the color of embers. Far below those heights, on a rolling sea of purple sage, a lone rider moved toward a ranch that lay like an island in that fragrant ocean. Her name was Jane Witherstein. She rode side saddle, with the easy grace of someone born to horses and wide sky. The brim of her hat cast a shadow over eyes the color of clear water, but even from a distance there was something unyielding in her posture. Jane was not old, nor hard, but she carried herself like a woman who had made up her mind to stand and not to bend. Ahead of her, set in a shallow basin, lay Witherstein House. The ranch house was built of thick adobe, with a long, shaded porch and a row of narrow windows that watched the sage. Cottonwoods huddled close, their leaves whispering around a square of green grass. In a land where color was mostly rock and sky, that green was a kind of miracle. A large stone well stood near the house, the rope worn dark from years of hands drawing water. To one side stretched corrals fenced of split cedar posts, and beyond them, a cluster of low barns with roofs faded by sun and storm. Beyond all that, like a wall of smoke frozen in place, rose the purple sage. When the wind came, it moved in waves, violet and silver, rolling away toward the cliffs. The smell of it, sharp, clean, tinged with dust and the memory of rain, was the scent of this corner of the world, as much a part of Jane as her own breath. She reined in at the top of the rise and sat a moment, surveying what was hers. Cattle dotted the far pastures, red and white specks against the muted earth. Men moved among them, small as insects from this distance, but she knew their names, knew which would work until dark and which would disappear when no one watched. She knew who was loyal to her, and who was loyal to the church that quietly, and ever more boldly, sought to take this land from her. Her jaw tightened. This morning, like so many mornings lately, the ranch did not look only like home. It looked like a battleground. A shout echoed up from the yard, carried thin on the morning air. "Miss Witherstein! Jane!" She nudged her mare down the slope at an easy lope, dust rising soft behind her. As she approached, the men at the corral looked up. Most tipped their hats. One of them, broad-shouldered, sun-browned, with honest blue eyes, hurried out to meet her at the gate. Bern Venters. "Morning, Bern," Jane said, swinging lightly from the saddle. "You're out early, even for you." He caught the reins. "Cattle were restless at first light. I wanted to take a look along the North Range." He hesitated, his expression darkening. "There are tracks. Too many for strays. Could be rustlers. Could be something else." They both knew what that meant. These were not ordinary rustlers, the sort any man in the sage country might expect and be ready for. These were men who disappeared into canyons no outsider ever saw. Men who had a way of appearing whenever a certain elder of the church wanted pressure applied. Jane's gaze drifted beyond the corrals, toward the distant shadowed breaks in the cliffs. Narrow canyons lay out there, hidden behind the swell of the land, places where riders and stolen cattle could vanish as if the desert itself had swallowed them whole. "Did you see them?" she asked quietly. Burns shook his head. "No, but the sign is fresh, and there's talk in the village. They say Bishop Tull met last night with some men from the outer settlements. Strangers, hard-looking types." At the name, a flicker of anger passed over Jane's face. Bishop Dyer Tull was a tall, spare man with a voice like a sermon and eyes like a noose. He had baptized her, taught her, and praised her piety when she had sat meekly on the front bench. Now, when she used her wealth and influence to show kindness to those the church frowned upon. Outlanders, Gentiles, riders without a faith but their own. His gaze had turned from fond to cold. "I suppose," she said, "they met to pray." Byrne gave a humorless snort. "Prayers don't leave tracks in the sage." Jane's smile was faint, brittle. "No, they don't." For a moment, wind filled the space between them. Jane listened to the rustle of cottonwood leaves, the distant lowing of cattle, the clank of a bucket at the well. The ranch felt exposed, like a stage where all the players were already in their places and only waiting for the curtain to rise on some inevitable tragedy. "You should leave, Byrne," she said suddenly. He blinked. "Leave? Now?" "To the east, or north, to Cottonwoods, wherever the church has less power. You're too outspoken. You argue with them. You fight for me. That makes you a target. If anything happens here." "And if I go," he cut in, blue eyes hard, "what then? You stand here alone while Tull and his men choke this place to death?" She opened her mouth, closed it. The truth of it pressed on her like the weight of the cliffs. "I have other riders," she said weakly. "Riders who will leave as soon as they're told they'll lose their place in the church if they stay," Byrne replied. "We both know it." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Jane, listen to me. They mean to break you. They'll take your herd, your water, your horses, whatever they must." "What I have," she said with sudden fire, "I have built. My father worked this land before me. I have given cattle to widows, food to children, wages to men who had nowhere else to work. I will not see it taken and do nothing." Burns studied her a moment. There was admiration in his gaze, and something else, something softer he seemed to force back. "Then I stay," he said simply. She knew better than to argue further. Byrne Venters was stubborn as any stone in these hills, and twice as reliable. She laid a hand on his arm, a brief, grateful touch. "Very well," she said. "But keep your eyes open, Byrne, and your gun closer than your shadow." He grimaced in half a smile. "In this country, that's the same thing." They were still standing there, Jane with her hand resting lightly on Byrne's arm, when the riders came. They heard them first, the sharp clatter of iron-shod hooves on hard ground, the jingle of spurs, the murmur of low voices. Men turned in the yard, tools paused mid-swing. The air seemed to thin, as if the wind itself were holding its breath. A group of 6 riders trotted into the open yard, horses throwing dust. In their midst rode a man with a tall, straight back and a black coat that looked too formal for this harsh country. Bishop Tull. He dismounted with deliberate calm, his black hat low over eyes as pale as winter sky. He took in the ranch with a slow sweep of his gaze, the house, the corrals, the men. Like a surveyor, measuring out land that already belonged to him. "Good morning, Sister Witherstein," he said. Jane drew herself up. She felt again the old reflex, the urge to bow her head, to accept whatever judgment came. She straightened instead. "Bishop Tull," she replied evenly. "You come early. Is it church business?" "Always," he said with a thin smile. "The care of souls admits no idleness, nor does the protection of our community." His attention slid to Byrne, who still stood at Jane's side. "And the presence of Gentile riders on a believer's land," he added softly. Byrne's jaw clenched. "My work here harms no one," he said, "unless you count keeping rustlers off Miss Witherstein's cattle as harm to the church." One of Tull's men shifted in his saddle, hand resting near a holstered gun. Jane's heart gave a nervous kick. "Burn, please," she murmured. Then louder, "He is under my hire, Bishop. My land, my wages. Surely that is my affair." Tull folded his hands before him, fingers long and pale. "Your soul is the church's affair," he corrected. "And your influence. You give aid and favor to strangers. You spend the Lord's bounty raising up those who do not walk in his law. These things do not pass unnoticed." Jane kept her voice calm with effort. "I give because I believe it is right. The God I pray to is not troubled by hungry children being fed." Tull's eyes hardened, though the smile on his lips did not change. "Your compassion is admirable," he said. "Misguided, but admirable. Yet there are other matters." His gaze bored into hers. "You have once again refused the proposal of Elder DeWitt." A flush rose in Jane's cheeks, not of embarrassment, but of anger. "I have refused," she said, "politely, firmly, as is my right." "In this community," Tull said, "a woman's place is not to stand in pride alone upon the earth, but to join herself to a righteous man and raise children in the faith. You persist in your refusal. You insist on managing herds and riders like a man. You give work to those who should be turned from our gates." "I will not marry a man I do not love," Jane said quietly. "Nor will I give up the land my father left me, nor cast out those who have been loyal to me, because they do not sit in your pews." The moment stretched. Then, for the first time, Tull's smile vanished. "Then you will suffer the consequences of that defiance," he said. He turned slightly, pointing toward the distant slopes of sage. "Your herds graze in the outer ranges. They drink from streams that cross land the church lays claim to. If you will not align your household properly, perhaps the Lord will take from you that which leads your heart astray from obedience." Jane's fingers dug into her palms. "Those pastures were cleared and dug by my father and his riders, long before you laid a stone here." "And all land here belongs to the Lord," Tull said softly. "And the Lord works through his church." He inclined his head, as if the matter were concluded. "Consider, Sister Witherstein, you still have time to repent, to accept rightful order, to drive out those who lead you astray from obedience." His eyes flicked once more to Byrne. Then he remounted, his men wheeling their horses. Dust rose around them as they rode away, leaving the yard as silent as if a storm had passed. Jane exhaled shakily. "Well," Byrne muttered, "that's as plain a threat as I've ever heard without a hand touching a gun." Jane stared at the shrinking figures, a tightness in her chest. "They can't break what my father built," she whispered, as much to herself as to Byrne. In the distance, the sage rippled under the wind, purple and inscrutable. From that sea of brush and shadow, something else was coming. A single rider, dark against the brightening morning, heading for Witherstein House, with the steady, deceptive slowness of inevitability. He appeared first as a shape on the horizon, a smudge where the sage met the sky. Byrne saw him while Jane was inside, steadying her breath with work. She had always believed that to keep her hands busy was to keep fear at bay. Byrne rested one arm on the corral fence, eyes narrowed against the glare. The distant figure drew closer, picking his way along one of the faint trails that threaded through the sage. A man on a dark horse, moving with the loose, balanced ease of someone born to a saddle. As he came into clearer view, Byrne saw the details. Black hat, brim tipped low. Black shirt, faded but clean. 2 guns, worn but well kept, resting low on his hips in oiled leather holsters. There was a particular way gunfighters carried themselves. Relaxed, but with a stillness underneath, a watchful calm, like a coiled spring. This rider moved like that. Burns straightened, hand unconsciously brushing the butt of his own sidearm. "Another of Tull's men?" one of the cowhands muttered nervously. Burns shook his head. "No, Tull's men swagger. This one doesn't need to." The rider came all the way into the yard before he slowed. Dust rose around the horse's legs. The animal, a deep-chested, dark bay gelding with a white blaze, snorted and tossed its head once, then stood quietly. The stranger swung down with unhurried grace. He was lean, hard, maybe in his late 30s, though the weathering on his face made guessing difficult. His hair, under the hat brim, was dark. His eyes, Burn could not yet see their color, but he felt the weight of their appraisal as the man took in the yard, the house, the men. "Morning," the stranger said, voice low, carrying easily. "Morning," Burn replied. "You're far from most places. Get lost?" The man's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Rarely," he said. He stepped forward, boot heels whispering on the packed earth. "This Witherstein house?" "It is," Burn said. "I'm looking for a woman named Jane Witherstein." Burn's shoulders stiffened. Tull again? Another angle? Another piece placed on the board? "What's your business with her?" he asked, his tone polite but edged. The stranger regarded him for a moment, as if weighing him. "Maybe she'll decide if it's her business," he said. "You Jane?" The last question was directed past Burn. He turned. Jane stood on the porch, one hand resting on a post, the other smoothing her skirt. She had heard the rider's voice and come out, drawn by curiosity and something more. A sense, perhaps, that the wind had shifted and the day would not be like other days. "I am Jane Witherstein," she said. The stranger's gaze moved to her and changed in some small way. Less measuring, more intent. He lifted a hand to touch the brim of his hat, a gesture that was more respectful than polished. "Ma'am," he said. "Name's Lassiter." The name moved through the yard like a gust through the sage. Several of the hands glanced at each other, faces tightening. Burn's breath caught. Lassiter. He had never seen the man, but the name rode ahead of him like a legend in these borderlands. A gunman who had carved a trail across the territories, whose enemies tended to end up in the ground. Some said he hunted men who had wronged his family. Some said he hunted anyone who wore a certain cut of coat. Everyone agreed on 2 things. He did not miss, and he did not stop. Jane did not know all the rumors, but she had heard enough to feel a shiver along her spine. "Lassiter," she repeated quietly. "I've heard that name." "I expect you have," he said. "And what brings you to my land?" "Lassiter?" "The same thing that brings me most places now," he replied. "A trail I've been following many years. I heard tell there was a woman out here. A woman named Millie Earn. Took up with some Mormons, then disappeared." His eyes sharpened. "You know that name?" Jane's throat tightened. Millie Earn. Yes, she knew that name. Whispered once in the women's quarters, mentioned once by a girl whose brother had known a Gentile woman, kind and lost, who had come among the saints, been taken under the protection of certain elders, and then vanished. I heard of her, Jane said. A long time ago. I don't know where she went. I don't know what was done. Lassiter watched her face as she spoke, as if testing the truth of her words. His eyes were strange. Gray, she saw now, but a gray that could be soft cloud or hard stone, depending on how the light struck them. "All right," he said finally. "I reckon that's so. I'll keep asking around." He turned slightly, taking in the house, the corrals, the cattle in the distance. "It's a fine place you got here, ma'am." "Thank you," she said, still watching him warily. "It was my father's." He nodded once. "You sure draw trouble, though." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I passed some men on my way," he said. Hard eyes. Rode like they owned the land. Wasn't a few miles out when I saw cattle sign turned wrong. Stock pushed toward the brakes. Could smell powder in the air, and fear too. He looked back at her. "You at war with somebody, Miss Witherstein?" Jane hesitated, then laughed softly, bitterly. "War," she said. "They would never call it that. They would say it's only God's will that I bow my head a little lower." She met his gaze. "Yes, I am at war." Lassiter's gaze flicked to Byrne, who still hovered protectively near. "You her foreman?" he asked. "I'm Byrne Venters," Byrne said. "Rider, friend." "Friend," Lassiter repeated. "That can be a dangerous job in these parts." Byrne smiled tightly. "I've noticed." Lassiter considered that, then nodded toward the open sage. "Where those brakes head?" he asked. "Those canyons out yonder?" Byrne followed his gaze. "Toward a place folks call Deception Pass," he said. "Beyond that, who knows? Some say rustlers. Some say there's a hidden valley. I've never found it." Lassiter's eyes narrowed. "Rustlers," he said softly. "Always the same story. Men disappear. Women too. And somewhere in the middle, a church that don't like being looked at too close." He looked back at Jane. "Ma'am, I don't mind trouble," he said. "I brought my share into this world, but I try not to ride into a man's war uninvited. If you want, I'll move along. No offense taken." Jane studied him. Here he stood, a man whose name was spoken in the same tone as storms and gunfire. A man who could bring more danger, yet perhaps also a kind she desperately needed. A weapon pointed in the right direction might be the only thing that kept her world from being ground to dust between the gears of power. She thought of Tull's pale eyes, of the veiled threats, of her cattle disappearing, her riders looking over their shoulders. She thought of her father, who had taught her that a land without courage was already lost. "Mr. Lassiter," she said softly, "I do not know what you have done, or what you have lost. I know only what stands before me. A man who saw wrong sign on the range and came to warn me." She lifted her chin. "If you are a bad man, I will answer for trusting you. But if you are the kind of bad this country needs..." She paused, the faintest smile touching her lips. "Then I invite you to stay. Eat at my table. Water your horse at my well. And if Tull or any other man comes to take from me by force what is mine by right, I will not be sorry to have you standing on my porch." A slow, almost reluctant smile curved Lassiter's mouth. "Ma'am," he said, That's the finest invitation I've had in many a year. He touched his hat again, then led his horse toward the hitching rail. Byrne watched him go, a knot tightening in his gut. Jane had just invited a storm into her house. But then, he thought grimly, the sky was blackening anyway. Better a storm that broke in the open than a slow suffocation in silence. Days passed, and the rhythm of the ranch shifted, almost imperceptibly, around the presence of the man in black. Lassiter did not talk much. He rose early, rode the fences without being asked, fixed a broken gate with the quiet efficiency of someone who understood how quickly a small weakness could become a catastrophe in this country. He ate at the big table, hat off, saying little, listening much. At first, the hands watched him warily, as if he were a coiled snake on the porch, danger that might strike anyone careless enough to step too near. But in the sage country, men judge other men by deeds long before words, and Lassiter's deeds were solid. He did not bully, he did not brag. When he rode out with the hands and a rattler showed its head near a horse's leg, his gun flashed once, twice, so fast it seemed the shots had happened before the snake's tongue had fully flicked. When two young riders began a foolish scuffle by the corral, fists clenched and faces red, Lassiter stepped between them, his voice low and flat, and somehow that was enough. The fight died as quickly as if water had been thrown on a flame. Jane watched all this with growing respect and a quiet, wary curiosity. At night, when the stars came blazing out and the desert lay under a dome so clear, it seemed you could reach up and stir the constellations with your hand, she sometimes found Lassiter sitting alone on the porch, staring into the dark. "You look like a man who sees ghosts out there," she said once, bringing him a cup of coffee. He accepted it with a nod. "Don't have to look far to see mine," he replied. "You still haven't found her?" Jane asked gently. "Millie Earn?" His jaw tightened. "No," he said. "But I've found pieces. A name here, a rumor there. A woman taken under the protection of men in long coats. A grave with no marker. I ride and I ask, and sometimes I shoot. And someday, I reckon, I'll find the end of that trail." Jane hesitated. "And when you do?" Lassiter's eyes were very gray in the starlight. "Then," he said, "the Lord and I will have a reckoning." They were silent a while after that. Wind moved through the cottonwoods. Somewhere far off, a coyote yipped, then another, their voices rising and falling like questions tossed to the sky. In the house behind them, the lamplight glowed warm through the windows, casting rectangles of gold on the packed earth. It occurred to Jane that this too was a kind of frontier, the thin line of light between a hard man and the darkness he carried. She did not know if she could ever cross it, or if he ever would, but she was grateful that, for now, that darkness stood on her side of the fence. The war, when it finally broke fully into the open, began not with gunfire, but with water. The first sign came with the cattle. Byrne rode in one evening, his horse lathered, dust caked in the lines of his face. "They're driving your herd, Jane," he said, not even waiting to dismount. "Not rustlers. Or if they are, they're the holiest rustlers I've ever seen." "What do you mean?" she demanded. "I mean," he said, "I trailed your missing stock. Their sign goes straight toward a canyon I know leads through land claimed by the church. And the men driving them wear long coats and ride horses with church brands." Jane felt as if someone had reached into her chest and squeezed. "They're taking my herd," she whispered, "openly." "No," Byrne said grimly. "Openly would mean they admit it. This is worse. This is theft wrapped up in righteousness. They'll say the cattle wandered, or that the land they crossed made them tithes by default. They have a verse for every fence they break." She gripped the back of a chair to keep her hands from shaking. "How many?" she managed. 100 head today, he said. They'll take the rest, piece by piece, and then they'll come for your water. Lassiter, who had been listening from the doorway, spoke then. Water first, he said. Or last, it's the same. You lose that well, you lose this ranch. Jane turned to him, anguish in her eyes. What would you have me do? She asked. Ride into their settlement with a gun, shoot men I have known since childhood, men whose children I have held when they were sick? Lassiter's gaze was steady. I'd have you remember that a man can wear a preacher's coat and still be the worst kind of thief, he said. And that kindness don't mean you have to let him take your life out from under you. Byrne looked between them. Let me go after them, he said. I'll bring back proof. Cattle with your brand, being driven by their men. Bring that before the village. They won't be able to pretend. Jane shook her head, fear cutting through her anger. Byrne, no, she said. If you stand up in front of the elders and accuse them, they'll do what they already mean to do, Byrne snapped. At least this way, I make them show their hand. Lassiter's eyes narrowed. You ride into their teeth alone, he said. You best write your own epitaph first. Byrne met his gaze evenly. You have your trail, Lassiter, he said. I have mine. Jane, I can't stand by and watch them strip you bare and call it God's will. I won't. Jane's eyes burned with unshed tears. Then go, she said hoarsely. But promise me you won't draw first. Promise me you will give them no excuse to say you fired on a man of God. Byrne hesitated, then nodded. All right, he said. I promise. He was saddling his horse when a sound cut through the thick evening air. Hoofbeats. Many. Riding hard. Lassiter stepped to the edge of the yard, hand near his gun. Dust bloomed at the edge of the sage. A group of riders emerged, their horses blowing foam, their coats dark against the fading light. At their head rode Bishop Tull. He did not dismount this time. Jane Witherstein, he called. Come out here. She walked forward, shoulders square, though her heart hammered. This is my land, Bishop, she said. If you have business with me, you may dismount and speak as a neighbor, not a conqueror. Tull's lips thinned. I come as one entrusted with the care of your soul, he said, and of this community. Your defiance has gone far enough. You employ riders who lift their hands against God's chosen. You shelter a notorious gunman under your roof. You openly question the authority of the church. Jane's gaze flicked briefly to Lassiter. He has done nothing here but work and protect, she said. If anyone has lifted hands, it is your men against my herd. Murmurs shifted uneasily among the riders at Tull's back. Not all of them were comfortable with the nakedness of this confrontation. Tull ignored them. You will dismiss this Gentile gunman, he said coldly. You will send away Byrne Venters. You will yield your outer pastures to the church's management and place your herd under our stewardship. You will reconsider Elder DeWitt's proposal. These things done, your sins may yet be forgiven. Jane drew in a slow breath. The world seemed to shrink to the space between her and Tull. The ranch, the sage, the cliffs, all were a backdrop now for this one thing, this choice. If she yielded, she would still have some land. She might keep the house. She might even keep her seat in the church. She would be safe. Submission, in its way, was a kind of shelter. If she refused, her voice, when it came, surprised her with how steady it was. No, she said. The word hung in the air like a shot. Tull's face went still, all pretense of softness dropping away. Think carefully, sister, he said. I have, she replied. I will not send away men who have stood by me. I will not give up what my father left in my care to men who steal by night and quote scripture by day. I will not marry to please you. I will not call theft righteousness. Color rose in Tull's cheeks, a dark flush. Then this land will not shelter you long, he hissed, and those who stand with you will fall with you. His gaze cut to Lassiter. And you, sir, you are known to us. You bring your violence into a peaceful community. You set yourself against the will of God. Lassiter's reply was very quiet. I've yet to see God ride with rustlers, he said, but I've seen your kind many times. Tull's eyes flashed. Men like you fade, he said. The church remains. You'd be surprised, Lassiter said. For a heartbeat, it seemed Tull might order his men to draw then and there. Hands hovered near guns, horses stamped, sweat darkening their flanks. Then Tull jerked his reins. We are done here, he snapped. For now. He wheeled his horse, and his riders followed, leaving churned earth and a silence that felt like the pause between lightning and thunder. Jane stood very still. Her hands were shaking now, but she did not look away from the direction they had gone. I've signed my own ruin, she said softly. No, Lassiter said. You've signed theirs, if you stand fast. Byrne exhaled, a harsh sound. They'll strike next at the one thing we can't guard every moment, he said. Jane looked at him. The well, he said. Your water. The three of them turned as one toward the old stone well that had fed Witherstein House for a generation. The desert wind sighed through the sage, carrying with it the faint scent of dust and something else. The smell of a storm coming. What happened at the well? How Tull's men tried to poison it. How Lassiter's guns spoke from the shadows. How the stonework cracked under dynamite and then, by some miracle of rock and pressure, held, would be told later in half a dozen versions by riders scattered across the sage. To Jane, it became a blur of sound and light, the roar of an explosion, the shriek of frightened horses, the flat bark of Lassiter's pistols, Byrne's shout as he tackled a man reaching for the fuse, the sickening moment when water, her water, spilled out in a muddy torrent, and she thought for one wild instant that everything was broken. In the end, the well still stood, though the stone was cracked and a section of the outer wall lay in rubble. Two of Tull's men lay on the ground, one groaning, wounded in the leg, the other unnaturally still. Lassiter stood over them, pistols smoking, his breath coming harsh and fast. He had not missed. Byrne wiped blood from a cut on his forehead, chest heaving. They'll call this an attack on the church, he said bitterly. They'll say we fired first. Then let them, Lassiter said. Your truth don't run through their mouths. Jane knelt beside the wounded man. His face was gray with pain and shock, but his eyes were open, staring up at her with a mix of fear and something like shame. Water, he gasped. She gave it to him. In that moment, with dust thick in the air and the echo of gunshots still ringing off the cliffs, she chose again what kind of woman she would be in this war. Carry him into the shade, she told Byrne. We will tend his wound. The other, she swallowed, glancing at the still body. We will bury him. Lassiter watched her, expression unreadable. You could leave them to Tull's mercy, he said. Let their own see what his orders cost. Perhaps, she said quietly, but I will not become him to fight him. He nodded, just once. In the days that followed, the war escalated. Fences were cut, cattle vanished. Men who had once tipped their hats to Jane in the village now turned their faces away, or looked at her with narrow suspicion. Tull preached sermons about obedience and the danger of pride. And through it all, the three at the heart of Witherstein House, Jane, Byrne, and Lassiter, fought as best they could. They fought with guns and with words. Jane rode to the homes of men she had helped, called in favors, pleaded with them to stand up against the quiet tyranny creeping over their lives. Some listened, many did not. Fear is a hard thing to push back once it's crept under a door. Byrne rode the ranges, clashing with rustlers, tracking stolen stock, pushing himself and his horse to the edge of exhaustion. In one of those pursuits, he found something unexpected. A masked rider, small and swift, who moved with the grace of a ghost across the purple sage. They crossed paths at dusk, on the lip of a nameless canyon, chasing the same spooked herd. The masked rider wheeled their horse, guns drawn, and a brief, white-hot exchange of fire left both alive and breathing hard, staring at each other across a few yards of dust. "Who are you?" Byrne demanded. The rider's eyes, startlingly dark and bright behind the kerchief, held his. "No one," came a low, steady voice. "Nothing. Go home, rider. You don't belong in the places I ride." But in that moment, something passed between them. Recognition of another soul cut loose from any easy belonging. In time, that recognition would grow into something neither of them expected. A bond forged in danger, a love born in a hidden valley that would become, for a while, their whole world. For now, they parted, each carrying the other's image like a question tucked into the pocket of their mind. Back at Witherstein House, nights grew quieter. There were fewer voices at the long table now. Some riders had drifted away, unwilling to stand openly against the church. Others had been warned, quietly, that their families would suffer if they stayed. Jane did not blame them, but each absence cut. In those dwindling evenings, Lassiter became a larger presence in the house, not by word, but by simply being there. He helped repair the busted stone at the well. He shot 2 more rattlers that tried to make homes where bare feet might tread. He said little, but Jane found that his silence felt less like a wall than a kind of shelter. One night, when she brought him coffee again on the porch, he looked at her a long moment before taking it. "You had chances to bend," he said. "Most would." She wrapped her arms around herself, chilled by more than the air. "I was raised to obey," she said. "I believe that was goodness, that God wanted my spine soft and my head bowed. Then I saw what was done in His name, what men like Tull do when no one says no." She met his gaze. "I will never again call it virtue to close my eyes." He nodded slowly. "Reckon you and I came to the same place," he said, "from different roads." She smiled faintly. "Yours was paved with bullets," she said. "Yours with prayers," he replied. "Both can cut a man up, if he ain't careful." The sky above them was enormous, scattered with stars. The Milky Way stretched like a pale wound across the darkness. The cliffs stood black against that glittering backdrop, guardians of secrets older than any church. In that moment, Jane realized something with startling clarity. She was no longer afraid of Lassiter. She was instead quietly afraid of how much less alone she felt when he was near. It could not last. No war like this stays balanced forever on the edge of a knife. The final turn came when Byrne did not return one night. He had ridden out at dawn, following a fresh line of stolen cattle, and as the sun slid down the sky and shadows stretched long across the yard, Jane felt a weight gathering in her chest. "Something's wrong," she said. Lassiter, who had been oiling his guns at the table, did not argue. By full dark, when even the sage seemed to hold its breath, a rider appeared at the edge of the yard. Not Byrne. One of the younger hands, eyes wild, horse blowing hard. "Miss Witherstein!" he gasped. "They got him! They got Byrne!" The words hit Jane like a physical blow. "Who?" she demanded, grabbing the boy's arm. "How? Is he alive?" The words tumbled out. Ambush, church riders, an accusation of assault on a priest, a quick, rigged hearing in the village. Sentence, whipping and exile. Maybe worse. They said they might hang him," the boy choked. Tull was there, smiling. Something broke in Jane. "No," she whispered. "No." She turned, eyes streaming to Lassiter. "Will you help me?" she asked. "Not for me, for him. They'll kill him to make an example." Lassiter's jaw worked. "Jane," he said quietly, "if I ride into that village and draw on Tull's men, there won't be no pretending after. It will be war, plain and open." "It already is," she said. "They just call it God's will." He looked at her a long moment. "All right," he said. He stood, holstered his guns, and stepped into the night. The rescue of burned Venters from the shadow of the church gallows would be talked about wherever Western riders gathered for years afterward. Some would say Lassiter walked into the square at noon, guns on his hips, and called Tull out before the entire village. Others would swear it happened at night, with shadows for allies and knives for punctuation. The version Jane knew was this. He rode in under cover of darkness, one more shadow among the many, and found Byrne in a rough-hewn cell behind the meeting house, wrists raw from rope. 2 guards lay sleeping nearby, bottles at their sides. Lassiter did not kill them. He bound them instead, gagged them, left them staring wide-eyed as he eased Byrne's battered body up onto a waiting horse. When they saw movement near the front of the meeting house, men with lamps, Tull's pale face among them, Lassiter did what he had always done best. He stepped into the open and drew. 2 shots cracked across the square, flat and hard against the stone walls. A lantern shattered. Another flew from the startled grip of a guard. Darkness swallowed the men for a crucial few seconds, and in that confusion, Lassiter drove his heels into his horse's flanks and rode hell-bent out of town, Byrne tied in the saddle ahead of him. Shots chased them into the sage. Bullets spit up dust at their heels. Lassiter rode low, horse stretched out like a running shadow, the wind a howl in his ears. When they reached Witherstein House, the eastern sky was just beginning to pale. Jane met them in the yard, skirts flying, hair unbound, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her face. "Byrne," she whispered, reaching up to touch his bruised cheek. "Oh, Byrne." He managed a ghost of a smile. "Always told you I'd come back," he rasped. They carried him inside. Lassiter leaned against the porch post as dawn came, chest heaving, shirt damp with sweat. His guns were empty. He had not killed Tull. Not yet. But he had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The church would call it rebellion. They would call him murderer, kidnapper, devil. He looked through the open door toward where Jane knelt beside Byrne's bed, bandaging his wrists with hands that shook only a little. For the first time in years, Lassiter wondered if something might be worth whatever hell he had just unlocked. The end for Witherstein House did not come in a single day. It came the way floods come, slow seeping, swelling, then all at once. Men stopped coming to work. Supplies from the village dried up. Tull's riders were seen more often at the fringes of the ranch, then nearer, than in the shadows of the cottonwoods themselves. One evening, as a hot wind blew dust like smoke across the yard, Lassiter came to Jane with a proposal. "Byrne's strong enough to ride," he said. "Not far, but enough. I found a trail, one these rustlers use. It leads into the breaks. There's a place out there. if the stories are true. A valley the church don't know about. Not yet. Water, grass, caves enough to stable horses and hide a small herd. He looked at her. You can't hold this house forever. Tull will bring numbers you can't match. But you can take what matters and vanish. Jane stared at him. Run, she said bitterly. Hide like a thief, from land that is mine. Live, he said simply. There's no shame in that. Your house is stone and wood. Your herd is meat and bone. What matters is the lives that walk away from here breathing. She turned away, fists clenched. My father built this place, she whispered. And he'd tell you to live to build another, Lassiter said. Silence stretched. She looked back at him, eyes red-rimmed but blazing. Would you come with us? She asked. He blinked, as if the question had not occurred to him. I've got my own trail, he said slowly. Millie's trail. Maybe they're the same now, Jane said. The men who hurt her, the ones who hurt me, the ones you hunt. They wear the same faces as Tull. They speak the same words. If there is a reckoning to come, maybe it is not in some distant town. Maybe it's here, with us. He looked at her for a long time. You're asking me to tie my guns to your fate, he said. I'm asking you to share mine, she replied, soft but firm. Something shifted in his gaze. A wall, perhaps, cracking. All right, he said. They left Witherstein House before dawn. The house stood behind them in the half-light, familiar lines softened by distance. Jane had walked through it one last time, touching the back of chairs, the edges of door frames, the stove where she'd boiled countless pots of coffee. She took almost nothing, some clothes, a Bible, a small tin box of coin.